Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today is Friday, and it is March the 14th, and we are streaming live. It's a friendly Friday. We're going to have author and host of the American Radicals podcast, and my friend and your friend, Steve Friend, joining us momentarily. Got a lot to talk about today because apparently we're all going to get swatted, or maybe just me and people that are like me. Or maybe just people like me and not me. Hopefully not me. I'm not real crazy about getting swatted. I wanted to talk about weaponized government, which is something we do all the time. But I had a revelation this morning, and as I was driving over to my old house, because we've had to switch from one place to another, but I left the studio in place. As I drove to the old house where the studio is and sat here to talk to you, it occurred to me that swatting is the perfect example. It's the pinnacle of weaponized government. It is the exact thing that we talk about in the most sort of pure and crystallized form. And we're going to get Steve Friend to talk about it. So we're going to get into swatting. We're going to talk about how governments have basically forgotten the mission of government. And swatting is the example of that we can see. But there are plenty others, including things like education. And that's what we talk about all the time. But I'm going to give you some ammunition in your discussions so you can say nice things in nice ways that are obviously true. Not antagonistic, so you can have these conversations. And then we'll do a little bit of culture war stuff too, because a guy named Sarah, aka Tim McBride, thinks that you need to stop letting him live in your head. We'll talk about that in a little bit too. Before we get any deeper into the weeds and before we get started with my friend, let's go ahead and get started with the folks over at Patriot Protect. Sorry, I was not trying to do a pregnant pause like that, but I did think it was fun. So the problem is that if you're living in the world, you are likely to be exposed to a data breach. Your data is being stored by all kinds of different companies. You never know when they're going to do it, and they can go undetected for months. They can basically leak all your information, private information that you don't want out there in the world. Your full name, social security number, your home address. This is how you get swatting. It turns out phone numbers, things like that. Drug test results. Anybody that's keeping information on you has the potential of losing that information. And if they do, then it can circulate around on the dark web. It's worse than a password leak because people can actually start up new bank accounts. They can take out loans in your name and so on and so forth. You wouldn't leave your front door unlocked. Why would you leave your identity wide open? The solution is to have a service that will help protect you and scrub the internet for all of your stuff and get rid of it. Patriot Protect uses a search and destroy protocol. They have a new blackout service that actually goes into the deep web or the dark web, scanning for all these sites, these data brokers and places where people are keeping all of your information and scrubbing it off. If you use our promo code Kyle, Kyle, you're going to save 15% on an annual subscription. I've got it now. My wife has it as well. Do something to protect yourself. That is the smart thing to do. You're seeing the landing screen right there. It's not, they're not spending money on making some fancy graphics. What they're doing is they're giving you an opportunity to try to scrub your stuff off. The one thing I can tell, and Steve and I were talking about this before we went live, I see much fewer on the robocall list. So you guys get there by going to patriot-protect.com/Kyle. Again, protect.com/Kyle. Sign up for that search and destroy protocol. Get yourself kind of protected from all these data brokers that are trying to sell your stuff. Don't let someone profit off your information. Nothing good about all that. Let's dive into what we got going on today. Here we go. And there he is. There's my friend. How you doing, Mr. Steve Friend?
I'm feeling a little pressure today. You've been teasing me for the last 2 days, so I better bring double the impact, right, on this friendly Friday.
Yeah. No, obviously that was the expectation. I need you to bring it all the way. Steve, your podcast is called the American Radicals Podcast. What makes you a radical?
Well, I engage in extreme activities. It's kind of up for what the government deems to be problematic extreme activities, but I think I'm probably radical in that I like to be left alone and do my own thing and have guns and say what I want and not have to worry about the government coming to my door to blast me in the face.
And when did that become a radical position, do you think?
September 12th, 2001.
That's very specific. Yeah. All right. That's fair. Do you have any particular instance that you can identify in your own life where you're like, I'm now a radical. I don't believe in the things, institutions or whatever, because you were a police officer. You worked for the government. In theory, you're, what did you call it? A system idealist?
Yep, I've always contended that if you work in law enforcement, you're not a system disruptor. Those are the criminals. Those are the people that are deviating from the civil society. They want to break the rules, break the laws, and hurt their fellow man. And then the system idealists are upholding not just the law, but the processes that are guaranteed by our constitutional republic.
Let's talk about swatting. Can we start with that?
This is the new epidemic, apparently, on the political right.
What is swatting? Will you define it for people who are not familiar with this term and they think that it's just what you do to kids that are misbehaved and or flies that are buzzing around in your kitchen, both of which are great ideas, by the way. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, you need to just use the assault firearm for
the bug assault.
The bugs.
Yes. I have a Gen 3 bug assault, folks. We don't advertise for them, but I totally would. I have gone on killing spree. This is totally an aside, but we might as well. I have gone on killing sprees. The funny thing is, okay, so there's a pneumatic, like shotgun style weapon that sprays out salt at high velocity and it injures, stuns, and or kills flies, right? You've seen the advertisement for it. I will load it up with cheap ionized salt and then I will roll around my house and I will massacre all the flies. Do you know what the downside is?
You have lots of dead flies all over the place.
That's true. I do leave the dead flies. That is not, I'm in the fly killing business, but not in the fly body disposing business.
It just attracts more of them, so that just gives me a target-rich environment.
Maybe. I just feel like my wife is good at cleaning up the flies, and so she does, and she hates it. So she doesn't like it when I go around there. The other thing is I leave significant amounts of salt because I'm shooting, like I'll shoot dozens of times. I'll go after these suckers and I'm pumping and I'm following down. So I will shoot a lot of salt and it ends up looking like an episode of Supernatural, like where Sam and Dean have like tried to expel the zombies or the demons and there's salt everywhere. Yeah, that was a Supernatural reference. Somebody got excited. I have some like weird nerdy knowledge in my head. I've made a Firefly reference the other day, and somebody in the comments was like, "Best episode ever!" Reference Serenity and Firefly.
Serenity, man, that's one of my wife's favorite.
Isn't it?
Yeah,
it's great. Somebody was like, "This episode was shiny," and I was like, "Oh dear."
In space is awesome.
Yeah. No, I agree. Anyway, so the bug assault is good for that, but if you're leaving salt everywhere, you have to have a teammate, and I have a teammate. That has nothing to do with what we were talking about.
No, we were talking about
okay,
swatting.
Swatting
would be essentially the next level up of doxing, right? Like you are able to somehow find out an individual's location, and then you summon the police to their location under the guise that there's some sort of emergency happening there, giving them exigent circumstances, that there could be a violent action coming in that's going to require them to go in without following the normal due process protocols where they'd have to get like a search warrant to go in if there's a threat to life. And this is being used and weaponized against people. And now the police are coming in an aggressive fashion. They're more inclined to be the hammer in search of a nail because their expectation is that they're trying to interrupt a negative consequence from happening, like somebody being murdered or something to that effect.
All right, use the word weaponized. We use it all the time. Can you define what you believe the word weaponized is about? I'm getting to an argument here that I want people to be able to walk away with, and we're going to kind of define terms, and then we're going to make the position push. So go ahead.
It would be basically mutating, I guess, the function of the government to achieve a particular outcome rather than letting the process play out naturally and organically. Okay.
And what, as a former police officer and a former FBI agent, what is the purpose of law enforcement, let's say, at any given level? What are you supposed to see law enforcement do?
Protect citizens against fraud and force.
Okay. And you said weaponized is seeing a perversion of this. Is that an accurate word?
I think that's probably a more appropriate than mute. But we were watching the Ninja Turtles. That's probably where my mind was at the moment. But yes, a perversion is of that. And actually, it can, in essence, use the police and use the government as a unwitting participant in your perversion as well. I mean, because you have police officers responding to a scene in good faith. They actually have qualified immunity that they're going to go there to interrupt something negative from happening, and they could actually have been a useful idiot.
All right. The argument that I want to make is that swatting is the apex of weaponized government, because you are literally using the thing that is designed to stop force and fraud, as you mentioned, that is supposed to protect people from those who are the antisocial actors, from those who would do harm to them. And you're using that institution to actually be the implement of harm. You are actually using it as a weapon. It is the perfect perversion of what happens when government basically is no longer serving the mission, but actually the opposite of the mission and doing so on behalf of someone that is willing it.
It turns it into the photo negative of what it's intended to be. The only question is, what's the driving factor behind it? Is it an independent party who's manipulating the system, or is it the government itself?
Right. So if the government's driving it, you'd call that weaponized government. And if it's an independent party, what do we call that? Because that's what we're seeing right now. We're seeing basically that the political left, although we might say that is very similar to alignment with the government. At least a lot of agencies within the government actually align that way. We're seeing it being. Does that mean that the agencies that are being used as swatting, responding forces, are they complicit? Do they have the potential of being complicit?
They absolutely do if they're not doing their due diligence. Particularly, we're seeing these reports that they're going to these houses multiple times. I mean, you would think that there would be some sort of notation put in there, which you do in law enforcement. I mean, there was these frequent flyers, you could call them, that as a patrolman, you would always go to that location. And look, if you rode your beat every day, you kind of knew them because you just were always going. But you would always put a note in there because what if you're sick one day or you're off on a vacation and somebody else is filling in and they're less familiar with that area? You would put a notation. Hey, this is a house. This is an emotionally disturbed person. This is a person who is saying that there's a ray that's shooting into their nose, and this is something that you should be aware of, so that when the call comes in, you're less inclined to be like geeked up and taking it at face value that the person is maybe reporting something that's not necessarily accurate.
What is CAD?
CAD is the way you do it. CAD is a system where you, as a police officer, have the ability to input data, input information, and tie it specifically to a person or to a location so that there is a track record and a history. CAD has saved my butt from emotionally disturbed people on multiple times where people were calling in and saying that officer friend is harassing me. And then we go back into the CAD and realize, oh, this is a person who is a crazy person and that has been saying these things about every single officer on the force. And I mean, you're able to have that permanent record. It is permanent. I mean, it's basically like recording of the radio transmissions so that that information is out there forever to know and have it as a reference point.
I see our chat is trying to define the term or the acronym CAD. It's computer-aided dispatch when we talk about law enforcement, which means that there's a dispatch that usually comes out over the radio. That's going to be imminent sort of information that's coming out. Hey, need a responding officer at the following address. Please go and do this. And you need to go under various, respond code or not, sure. Exigent circumstances or otherwise. So they give you kind of the quick and dirty. We used to get the same thing on the ambulance where you'd get in there and they'd say, unconscious person, this address, and then somebody would roger up, yep, so-and-so, ambulance 9 responding. And then you start getting the call notes because they're staying on the phone. The 911 operator is on the phone still and getting information as necessary. Okay, there's an unconscious person. They're not breathing. It's a 38-year-old female, no medical history, recent instance of being out at a club partying, whatever. So you start working through the problem there. Same thing for a cop, I imagine. You're getting the same stuff where it's like, neighbors have been called to this address before. 3 other people were called last night. There was a loud party. Parties are intoxicated, no presence of a weapon, blah, 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 right? I mean, so you're getting information in a dispatch format that's kind of updating on the screen as you're doing the thing like navigating the roads real fast.
Yes, and is real-time information. I mean, it might be even something like caller is stating that their spouse was beating them but now has left the residence. So that would change the way that you're going to respond. You might have been running code and now there's not a threat to life that's imminent. You have to slow it down and it's going to change that. And it's a way to not have to clog up the actual airwaves, particularly if you ride with a partner because they're able to read through it while you're driving. I mean, theoretically, you don't want to be reading and driving, but
whatever. I always read and drive.
You always have to make the adjustment.
So did you. Don't act like you didn't.
Well, that's why they changed the law for us. There's no texting and driving statute against police officers in the state of Georgia.
Yeah, so when I used to work for the surveillance team, and a lot of times we would do these real wild moves where you'd be driving behind somebody, then you'd duck off, you'd make a turn that they didn't, so they would continue on. So you want to basically give the appearance that you're not following them, and then somebody else follows in, and then you have to go and catch up with this what we call the conga line. So you'd have like 8 cars that are kind of trailing at various distances to jump in, so that whenever someone drops off, a new person can follow. If somebody makes a turn, you continue straight, and you follow the subject. The second in line or the third in line will actually follow the subject. But then you got to catch up to the conga line, otherwise you're out and you're useless. You can't participate anymore. And I have done so many straight through from a right-hand turn lane just as the light is turning green, where you blast in front. God, it makes people so mad. You've never seen anyone drive as wild as a really decently trained surveillance agent. And while we're doing it, I'm looking on the screen and watching the Blue Force tracker of where's my team at, because I got to get behind the last dot. I'm seeing a dot on the screen running through the city streets. So we used to do that all the time. And I mean, I've done 90 and 100 miles an hour on surface streets and all kinds of cities all over America that probably look like the craziest things you've ever seen. I was doing it in like minivans, though. That was the best part. Like, you weren't doing it in performance cars or a squad car where people could recognize. You're blasting through these lights like in a gray minivan with like little side wigwag lights that are turning on, and you go past a cop who's sitting at a light, and they would just look at you just like, I don't even know what I just saw. Like, they don't even, I never had cops respond to me when we did wild stuff, and I did it in front of them all the time. Probably they're looking and they're like, dude, what?
I see you in this wood paneled van, like from the mid 90s,
I
like
wish.
a soccer mom, just killing it.
Yeah, the minivan of justice was a real thing, and it was always my preferred. There's tons of room in it. It's a great mobile shooting platform. It's an urban hide. There's all these other kind of things. In any case, wild stuff like that. So when we're talking about this idea of weaponized government, what I see is when government leaves the mission that it was created to do, and it starts doing something else. That's the biggest time, that's the opportunity for using it as a weapon, is when it's basically divorced. Here's my argument for you. I got a couple different videos. One of them is this lady who was in front of a congressional hearing, and she's talking about private schools. We played a clip yesterday. I'm going to play it again for you. She's a product of private schools, and she's arguing against school choice. And I want to hone in on the same argument that we did with the swatting piece, which is to say that she actually doesn't know what public schools are. All right. So I want to see if you come to the same conclusion as I do. Here's the first clip. We played this yesterday. We're going to play it again. If you listened yesterday, just bear with me. We're making a slightly different point. I think you guys will appreciate it.
Private school choice.
So did you go to a public school system?
No, I went to a private school.
Okay, you went to Head Royce School. Why? I spent time in Oakland. You had a choice in Oakland to go to public schools also. Why didn't your parents do that for you?
Well, I would remind you that children generally don't choose the school that they go to.
No, your parents
So
did. Your parents had a
correct.
choice. And your parents paid $30,000 to $50,000 a year for your choice. What gets me is how people like yourself, I would say this across the board, parents who have an option. They can put their kids in the best schools. They know that's an investment for their kids' future. And yet you come here and say how well it doesn't work. I just want to read this real quick. In reality, students who use voucher experience worse educational outcomes than their public school peers.
Do you have any belief that that's even remotely possible, that students using vouchers are getting worse outcomes than the public school peers?
No, that's not true at all. I mean, there's actually legitimate studies that show just the exact opposite of that from her. And this is just another example of an elitist and probably a member of the worst tribe in the world, the worst people in the world, liberal white women, kicking the door closed behind them and saying rules for thee, but not for me.
I actually think there's a slightly worse person than the liberal white lady. I've come to this conclusion today.
I think I know who this
You
person
think you know
is.
where I'm going to go? Yeah. The worst person is actually worse than liberal white ladies are men pretending to be liberal white ladies. That actually is slightly worse to me.
Counterpoint, could it be liberal white ladies who stand in solidarity with men pretending to be liberal white women?
I see them as very similar. Yeah. So they're obviously like fighting to get on the same podium, but I think the men win because men are stronger. So like quote unquote women with Adam's apples and penises that climb on top of the lady podium, they actually end up being the best at being liberal white women, just like they're the best at like the Randy Savage, like strong woman competition.
Because at our core, despite whatever makeup you put on your face and whatever procedures or hormones you inject, it comes down to the fact that all men are basically super competitive. We just need to know what the game is and what the rules are and how do I win. And when we get that information, the ladies really don't have much of a chance.
What you're saying is that every single cell in a man's body is a dick. I just wanted to throw that at you for no reason.
XXXY. It's the science.
Yeah, happy Friday and science. Okay, so enjoyable. So this is the other little piece. This is another guy asking this question. This is Mr. Kelly. He's the chairperson of this particular committee. I think it's it's the Committee on Education. And he asked this woman something, and she nails all of the wrong answers in one piece, which I absolutely love. I want you to listen specifically for one phrase. Public schools are the cornerstone of our democracy. I'm priming you for it because it's so special. Let's do the next clip. Here we go.
So just to understand your position, Ms. Levin, do you think that private schools should be abolished?
No, I do not.
Okay, because you referred to my colleague's line of questioning as an ad hominem attack, but I think that totally misses the point. You think that your parents are well within their rights to send you to a private school that costs tens of thousands of dollars in tuition.
At their own expense, yes.
And you support the right of Kamala Harris, Gavin Newsom, Joe Biden to send their child to private school.
I'm an attorney and the law supports their right, and I support it as well.
Okay, so you support the right of families to choose private schools if they can afford it. Is that right?
That's correct. I do believe that public education, though, is the cornerstone of our democracy, and I, as an individual, firmly support it.
Okay, but do you see how that might rub some people the wrong way when you support school choice for wealthy families but oppose efforts to extend that same opportunity to lower income families?
What do you think there, Steve? Is that a fun little gotcha moment?
Oh, it's very much like follow the breadcrumbs into this gingerbread house so I can eat you alive, as you did there. I was actually thinking more along the lines of how analogous that is to the healthcare argument. Like, healthcare is a right. And we have public education as a cornerstone of democracy, which is just coded language for things we like. And
Yes.
healthcare is a right, again, coded language for things we like. And look, they actually go further on healthcare because they'll say that if you have the ability and the finances to afford something, that you are not entitled to that everyone should actually have the right to go to the doctor and demand of their time services that you might not necessarily be able to afford.
Yeah, the cornerstone of our democracy thing makes me, that made me kind of perk up just a little bit, because earlier this week we played a couple different clips where we've heard things that, if I were to say taxation is, what would you say?
Theft.
Okay, so good. We agree on this. I didn't have any question about that. Taxation is theft. That's when the government takes your money. And they don't ask you, like, at the time, theoretically an elected representative is supposed to do it, but it's sort of like you have a say in the theft in theory, but maybe not in reality.
Theoretically, you get to vote for a representative who could then pass legislation to make them take and steal less of your money.
Right, but more on that in a minute, because we've decided that that's pretty theatrical. Would you?
Yes, it's one big party and we ain't in it. It's almost like it's set up for us to be like Hollywood for ugly people.
So we've got more for that in a second here as well. My point is that taxation is theft, and if we were to say that tax cuts cost money, then you live in a fundamentally different reality. You actually are divorced from the things that we agree. Like, that's why I wanted to define terms. That's usually what you do when you have an argument or a disagreement. You say, okay, well, let's define the terms. What do these things mean? Which is why the what is a woman argument is always so problematic for people. If you can't define the term that we're going to be talking about, how can you tell me something is this thing if you can't tell me what that thing is? And in the case of this public school, it's the cornerstone of our democracy. What I've determined is every single agency that I despise has forgotten what its purpose is or why it was created. And let me give you a really interesting example that came from the headlines, and I didn't know this is why I like this story. Look at this one. Democrats introduce a bill forcing Donald Trump administration to rehire fired veterans. So you read that, and that's from ABC, and you think this is from the 10th, so this is from Monday. And you go, oh, okay, well, they fired veterans, and therefore we want the veterans to be rehired. There's a problem in that. Are they good workers? Were they providing a value? Or is simply the purpose of the government to hire these veterans no further questions? And that's when you start getting completely divorced from the actual mission of what it is that government's supposed to do. It's doing an end, but it's forgot that there's like actually a purpose and it's supposed to achieve a goal.
And there's no evaluation of what each individual circumstances were here, but it's, again, more theater, right? Because they're going to say, well, you're doing this to the veterans. It's an appeal to authority. It's a pulling on the heartstrings of most Americans, because most people, they got to support the troops no matter what. And now you're saying, well, you exist. The government exists as a jobs program for particular groups of people that we have a case of the feels for. And that's not why the government exists. The government exists because there's a social compact involved. We agreed to give up some or limit some of our freedoms in return for duties and services that the government provides. Now, I think the government's doing way too much, going way beyond that. We've actually written down what the relationship was supposed to be, and we have not followed it for a very long time. But it is certainly not a jobs program for people who at one point served in a military capacity. And for them to set this up is basically just a messaging thing to say, like, look, they fired the vets who we 15 seconds ago were saying we're warmongers and we hated, but
and
now
we hate the fact that they won't get COVID shots. We're going to get rid of them for that.
Yes,
You can be fired
yes.
for not doing what we tell you, but you can't be fired because you want to make things more efficient.
No, you could. Well, efficiency is the enemy of bureaucracy, right? I
Yes.
mean, bureaucracy is set up to just grow. Success is in growth. It's not in actually achieving the mission unless you view, again, back to terms, what is the mission of your bureaucracy? Oh, to grow. That's
That's
why
how
we
you
do
measure
it.
success in a government agency, folks. If you don't know that, the only way that you can always tell you're successful is that your program continues to grow, not that it's done the mission or that it's being successful. You've added more people, you've added more responsibilities, and you've asked for more budget. Now you're winning.
Theoretically, the mission of any government service should be to work itself out of existence. Theoretically, the
Like,
Department
solve the
of Justice
problem.
would just do away with crime and then they wouldn't exist, right?
Right. And then, of course, we have the human condition, so we know it's not, but it should be striving to the least number. Instead, it's perversely incentivized to do the opposite. I'm going to do a quick sponsor read. This is something I actually have VA healthcare. This is that thing you saw on the screen was folks that were complaining about guys who were veterans being fired from the VA. I found the VA to be fairly inefficient. So we're going to talk a little bit quick about how you can take control of your own healthcare. This is one of the ways you can do it. You can go to the wellness company. It's twc.health/Kyle, K-Y-L-E, twc.health/Kyle. And here's the statement. This is my claim about this. I don't like being sick. I actually don't like going to the VA. I don't like going to any doctor's offices because making decisions and doing errands when I'm sick is my least favorite thing. As an adult, I've been sick a bunch of times, just like you, in my lifetime. So I kind of know what I need to do, and my time is more valuable. I'd much rather do downtime and resting and chicken soup and fluids and hanging out in bed if I'm going to be sick so I can get better sooner, so I can get back to do a podcast and so on. I don't want to hang out in pharmacy lines. If you want to take control of your own healthcare, one of the ways you can do it is by having an emergency medical kit from twc.health/Kyle. It's a prepare so you don't have to repair sort of thing. It's already at your house. It's like having a pharmacy in your medicine cabinet. You can always do this thing. You can also check out their contagion emergency kit if you are more prone to like airway issues. They have a nebulizer in there. They've got a Tamiflu. The other ones are containing things like ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, azithromycin, which is just a generic Z-Pack, a very broad spectrum antibiotic. They all come with a guidebook, so you can kind of look at the indications, what we call them, or the symptoms, and see how to use them. It takes about 2 minutes after you do the original buy. That's where the intake form is. It's very easy to do. One kit per person. It has to be prescribed to you, but they actually have refills on it. It's a really great product, and it's something that we use in the Seraphin house. The last time I got sick, I actually ended up doing exactly that, going to my medicine cabinet, not going out to find a physician. Again, it's TWC for the wellness company, twc.health/Kyle. There is a link in the show description if you guys are interested. Again, take control of your own health. Don't wait for someone else. That sort of self-reliant thing is what we talk about here a lot. And for whatever reason, all of our sponsors kind of like fit into that vein, which makes me happy. Maybe that's why I took them on as sponsors. What do you think about that, Steve?
I think you're nothing if not consistent with the messages. Prepare or repair on everything.
On everything.
It's almost like you don't want to have to wait on the government because when seconds count, the police are minutes away.
They are indeed. All right. So we did the private school lady. I got some Democrat theater because what they were crying about was that the government was going to be defunded. And so I've got kind of a good compilation with some background music of people that were crying about the possible defunding of said government, which is in fact like sort of their little demigod that they worship out at. That's where all the good things come from. That's where the education comes from, Steve. It comes from the government. Here's Democrats talking about how it'd be really bad if Republicans didn't fund it.
Republicans are marching America to a painful government shutdown.
But we need traditional Republicans to break with MAGA extremists so we can keep the government open.
Republican shutdown will cost 6,306 of her constituents their paychecks.
Put the bill on the floor for an up or down vote so we can end this MAGA Republican nightmare. And if you don't, you own this government shutdown.
Okay, and then they agreed that they were going to do a shutdown, right? Because they didn't want to vote for the continuing resolution, and they voted against it in the House. Yes?
Oh, yeah, they were. I mean, the script is being followed to a T. And can I, for a moment, just say the most libertarian thing ever was the Democrats saying that they were going to shut down the government. I was like, am I being radicalized? Do I like Chuck Schumer right now? Because that was the most optimal solution. All the non-essential people go home. All the essential people go to work. And now the Doge doesn't have to cull through that. And they're like, oh, well, everybody who's home right now just loses their job.
Well, let me give you another opinion by someone who is considered to be a thought leader of her generation. This is Jasmine Crockett, a.k.a. Dollar Store Cardi B. She's got thoughts. Here's her opinion about government shutdowns. I'll share them with you right now.
In my opinion, if we're shut down, you can't be fired. And what does that mean? It does mean that people will not be paid, but it does mean that they will get their back pay. So hopefully we can stop some of the bleeding. We just saw that the Department of Education laid off 50% of their workforce. So I don't really understand why anybody would say, oh, we got to take the high road. Listen, he is decimating the federal government. And you're talking about whether or not we're going to keep the doors open. He literally is shutting down departments anyway.
What does decimating mean, Steve?
Removing 1/10.
I wish he would do more than decimate.
Yes, that seems like rookie numbers from what we're expecting.
Yeah, 50%. There's not a word that I know for that, but that's what I want. Having them sounds really good. And so anyway, she's crying about that. The fun thing was, did you notice? She said, I think it's good because one, they can't get fired if the government shut down. So that's part one. That's her argument. And people will get their back pay, which is to say they will be paid for time that they are not working. Does that not give away the game that it's not about the work they do or the mission, that it's actually just about getting the paycheck?
That's all it's all about. I mean, by and large, the majority of government workers, their number one priority is keeping their job. Mm-hmm. It's not, again, the mission is not doing it. They might really work hard at their job. I mean, that's the minority of people, but they might actually do good work, but their job is just not worth doing. And the fact that now that we have more of a microscope into what people are doing, we're actually assessing, we're setting the bobs in Office Space style and asking, is your contribution here actually, is the juice worth the squeeze? And they just reject, and they have such umbrage with being asked that because they're just a civil servant, right? They're a career civil servant, and they they can never even for a moment think hey, maybe I'm not essential to the outcome here.
Because when there's a shutdown, what happens? When there's a shutdown, who doesn't come to work?
And you get paid. You get essentially a deferred paid vacation. That's how it is.
That's exactly what it is. And unless you work in law enforcement or one of the essential functions of government, then you're still required to show up if you want to still be paid when they start paying you again.
It might be a 13th Amendment violation, but maybe Thomas Massey could speak to that better than me.
Well, speaking of Thomas Massey, is there anybody that you've seen that seems to have, I don't know if it's like the Hubble Space Telescope, but can see into the future and see what's going to happen with all this stuff? How is it that some people seem to be able to predict the future? I have two different slides here that say the future is being predicted by Tom Massey.
Because the history repeats itself, or it rhymes at least, continually as it comes to funding the government over and over again. Tom Massey stands up there every single time and basically does the Eminem 8 Mile and says, I know what you're going to say about me. I know how this is exactly going to play out. You guys are already scheduled to go home for the weekend, so clearly this is all theater. And he makes people very uncomfortable when he does it. But the guy's principled, and he's not at risk of losing his seat anytime soon because he does what he says he's going to do, which is the one way that if you tell your constituents, I'm going to do X, and then you go do X, even if it makes everybody else in the country mad, you're pretty secure.
I had this interesting back and forth with Bill Mitchell, who used to be he was a representative for the Republican Party in Illinois. They've also elected such august leaders as Adam Kinzinger. So really strong, principled Republicans that only stand on the right and moral stance. But anyway, and he was saying that Tom Massey needs to be primaried, as so many people were. Obviously, Donald Trump said the same thing. You can say it all you want. They already tried this game. They did it in 2020. It was utterly ineffective. He still won by hundreds of thousands of votes. And for whatever reason, like you said, he's the guy that's running this. So here he is. I think this is October of last year. This is the second to last time that we had a CR fight, which happens every couple months, it turns out. So he's able to predict the future because he's seen the future so many times. He's like one of those engineers that recognizes patterns or something. Here's Tom Massey coming out saying why he was a no on the last time they had a spending bill.
Yeah. Can you just talk to us? Are you still a no? Is there anything?
They convinced me in there. I'm a no.
Is there anything anything?
Look what, let me, their own numbers. If the Republican plan passes under the rosiest assumptions, which aren't even true, we're going to add $328 billion to the deficit this year. We're going to add $295 billion to the deficit the year after that, and $242 billion to the deficit after that, under the rosiest assumptions. Why would I vote for that?
Why?
So are you solidly a no?
Yeah, they convinced me. I was a lean no until this meeting. Now I'm a
She
no.
was leaning no, but now
This is a no.
Why? Why?
They're talking points. Look. This is.
Then he goes
these
through
are
their
not
own
something
talking
I
points,
made
okay?
up. This is
Exact
from.
same thing all over again.
This
with
is
these
the leadership.
That girl looks like she's about 14 years old.
It adds $328 billion to the deficit. It adds $295 billion to the deficit the year after that. The only way they get to this magic thing where it's not going to kill our country is 5 years from now, they imagine that 2.5% growth accumulates. And that even right here, they say they're going to cap discretionary spending. You think we're going to cap discretionary spending? And
Right. So he's basically just making the argument, like, look, everything I know, because I've seen this before, this is a game we've played before, I'm not buying into it. I'm going to say my thing. We're going to come back to this in a second because I'm going to show you him predicting the future from just earlier this week. And he predicted what happened yesterday, which is always my favorite thing to do. Let's do this real quick. Let's talk about Blackout Coffee. Let's talk about my friends over there. It's blackoutcoffee.com/KYLE. It is what I started my morning with today. It took me a little while to get it in. I'm running on pitch black right now, folks. It's their espresso bean. And the other day I said I cranked it up from an 8 out of 16. It's actually 8 out of 10. That makes way more sense to you too, probably. But I brew up 2 liters of it. Listen up. We're putting you onto something that will change the way that you start your morning. Blackout Coffee. It's not just coffee. It's a wake-up call. It's a call to rise and grind, to push hard, to never compromise, to do what you just saw Tom Massey come and say, whether you like him or not, and he's still saying the right things. It's not your average cup of joe. It's a bag of Blackout Coffee that's roasted with purpose, packed with bold flavor, fueled by the kind of values that built this country. Grit, determination, not being taxed if you can help it. Refusal to back down. They don't just make coffee. They're making a statement, and they're stepping up and putting more people to work in America, you know, an American business, hiring American people, so that when you hit the order button, your coffee is coming in fresh and is ready to fuel your next move, whether you're powering through your daily grind or chasing down big goals or crushing government stupidity, which we do every day here, or refusing to settle for just mediocre performance. Blackout Coffee's got your back. Don't just drink coffee. Drink Blackout. blackoutcoffee.com/KYLE. Coupon code Kyle will save you 20% off your first order. Taste the coffee that doesn't just wake you up. It fires you up. A lot of you guys like this. This is the reason why we actually got them as a sponsor, because you turned me on to them. blackoutcoffee.com/KYLE. Let's do that. Go ahead and check underneath there. And while I'm talking about things that are firing me up, can I just say I appreciate all of you that are watching over here. I'm seeing as many as 2,000 people have tuned in over on X. We're seeing our highest numbers, almost 100 people watching on YouTube. We never get YouTube people, so that's really cool. We're starting to do that. I've got a YouTube rep coming in. You can follow us on Spotify, which I'd really appreciate if you guys are doing the download after the fact, only because you don't get a pop-up ad. And wherever you're listening, whatever you're watching, do me a big favor. Hit the like button. There's a thumbs up somewhere. Hit that. If there's a heart, if you're watching on X, hit that too. Promote by showing that you're liking it. And what it does is it gives the algorithm like a little thing, like somebody liked what they saw. And then it does promote it to the next person who's similar to you. There's probably a couple people out there that think like you do. Also, if you tell a friend, we very much appreciate that, because we could literally double overnight if you just told one person who actually tuned in. And that's huge for us. It's huge because I don't think we're being unreasonable here. If we're going to get America back to the middle and stop taxation as theft, we're going to have to do it by like having people open their eyes up and go, yes, of course. These are bad ideas. I am now armed with better arguments. Here's Tom Massey. Are you ready? You said it. He called it theater and production, right? What did he say that you heard him say earlier this week?
That the CR was going to be passed with just the Republicans through the House. And that then it would go to the Senate, and that they were going to need a certain number of Democrats to go along with it. And it was a fait accompli because the Democrats have some sort of retreat scheduled. So they're going to wail and gnash teeth, get on TV, and then ultimately at the last minute, then they're going to go through and pass it.
All right, here he is making that prediction real quickly. We'll do a short version of this clip, and then I will come back and show you exactly what he said happened, as per usual.
Hi, Congressman Massey here. I thought you'd like to know about the fake fight that's going on in the House of Representatives right now over this CR. They're trying to pitch it as a conservative CR versus liberal Democrats, and even the Democrats are going along in the House. But let me tell you why that's a fake fight. They plan to pass it with all Republicans here in the House. But after we leave town, the Democrats are going to vote for it in the Senate. That's right. They're going to need about 8 Democrat senators to vote for this thing over in the Senate. That means that this deal has already been cut, that Mike Johnson has cut a deal with the Senate Democrats, Senate leadership, and even Hakeem Jeffries, he's in on this, so that they can pitch their fake fight here in the House. Now, why am I so certain this is going to pass in the Senate when it gets over there with 8 Democrats or however many Democrats they need? Well, Mike Johnson is sending us home a day early. We're going to vote on this thing and skip town. If you thought there was really a threat of them not passing it in the Senate, why would you leave town? The other thing that's going on is the Democrats have a retreat, an off-site retreat, where they're going to get together and party and have, guest speakers and stuff. And that starts tomorrow and runs through Thursday and Friday.
Republican rejection leads us to a decision. And it's not really a decision, it's a Hobson's choice. Either proceed with the bill before us or risk Donald Trump throwing America into the chaos of a shutdown. This, in my view, is no choice at all. While the CR bill is very bad, the potential for a shutdown has consequences for America that are much, much worse.
And so we're going to do the thing that is so bad. We're going to fund the government the way that we already agreed to fund the government because Tom Massey already knew what was going to be happening. This was a waste of time and stupid.
We agreed to fund the government to funding levels that are exceeding what they were before, according to Tom Massey, according to the talking points, which he was asked for twice. They were doing the whole hey, Donald Trump, will you disavow the racists out there, the white supremacists? And he says yes. And they go, well, what about now? Do you disavow them now, like in this exact moment? Yes. Well, how about now? They just kept asking for the same talking points.
Why don't you start every speech with a disavowal of the racists?
So it's spending that was approved when we had a Democrat president, Democrat controlled the Senate, and essentially Democrat controlled the House because Mike Johnson is a eunuch who basically negotiated with Hakeem Jeffries to give him everything he wanted.
Yep.
And now we're going to do more than that, but that's catastrophic because reasons. Well, because we're supposed to oppose it because that gets us on TV and gets people to donate when they get their emails because they're not subscribing to sponsors of the Kyle Seraphin show, and they are going to get just lambasted and beat over the head that they need to contribute to campaigns of people like Chuck Schumer.
When government is completely detached from the purpose that it is stated to be, it's out there going and it's supposed to stop force and fraud from coming after people, when in reality, the only thing that matters is that they're considering your money, their money. Remember, tax cuts cost money. That means that them not taking as much of your money is somehow a cost. So they do creative accounting. I put you to the spot last time as my resident accounting guest. It doesn't make any sense to me, but we have that moment where you just have turned it on its head. So I was going to evaluate a spectrum, see what you think of this. On one side, you have government doing the thing that it's supposed to do, and it has the most light touch. Isn't that what they always teach you in law enforcement? The lightest touch necessary to bring people into custody, to affect the good that you're doing? Is that fair?
100%. That's you don't need to have an elephant gun to kill a mouse.
And is that not sort of the whistleblower disclosure that you actually brought forward when you were coming into Congress as a policy violation? That's how you end up losing your job? That's Steve Friend's position?
That was my position from the very beginning, that I had no objection to arresting someone under a lawful, and I would even at this point quibble with the way that they got that arrest warrant, but the means in which they were bringing a cooperative person who had pledged to do whatever he was asked with the SWAT team was an unnecessary risk to the public safety.
Okay, then you got in the middle. I'm going to say that's the right-hand side. That's the conservative argument, not Republican, mind you, conservative. That is the side that says minimal government, lightest touch possible, assigned a mission and attempting to carry out that mission. In the middle is that there's a mission, and the mission is just fund us. We're going to take your money, and we're going to build up these groups that are nominally supposed to do something, but they're not going to actually do it. But we don't really care because the real end goal is that money is being distributed to our preferred parties, and the status quo is being maintained. That's the sort of like squishy center left, center right position. This is George W. Bush. This was Bill Clinton. This was a lot of people in the middle who said, don't get too far outside the margins, but we're not going to do anything. And then the hard left position, in my opinion, is that we're going to use this tool, which should have the lightest touch. We're going to use the heaviest touch, and whatever the mission is, we're going to do the opposite of it. If it's supposed to protect people from force and fraud, we are actually going to fraudulently engage in force to come after them. That's the swatting piece. Is that a reasonable argument to you? Does that hit properly at all?
Yes. I mean, I would think that the Borg that is the communists probably encompasses the center and the far left of it at this point, because if you're not actually pushing back on this expansion of government power, then you're complicit in that. But I agree with you, especially in that far left, because their movement never ends. It will never be complete. They're always waging war until they destroy everything. And they will, even if they do achieve some sort of like destruction of institutions, then it's on to the next thing. It is an ongoing forever mission set.
Which is why they're more accurately referred to as progressives, right? Because they're always making progress. Even if it ends up hurting the original goal they had, they're still moving forward. By the way, this is a screenshot. I went looking for swatted conservatives because I wanted to see if it was being picked up by the mainstream media. This is a simple Google search, and these are two sets of results. One of them talks about a swatting that happened at a hospital somewhere in California. And the other one says something similar. They're all basically stories that have to do with hospitals and or institutions that are loved and favored by the left. Zero of them talking about how Sean Farish, how Chase Geiser, how Joe Pags, a friend of ours, has recently been swatted. I've got a little bit of Joe Pags' story, and I've got a little bit of Chase's. This is what it sounded like at 2 a.m. They've all happened in Texas, by the way. San Antonio and Austin. We've had a couple of those. We had Jamie White, who was an InfoWars reporter who was actually killed, unrelated to the swatting, but we don't know that this is not like a broader push to see people on the right punished for their wrong think, which is what we continue to think, until proven otherwise. I'm sort of living in that default position. It doesn't mean that I have the evidence for it. I just feel strongly that this is not unrelated, especially when the media refused to cover it. I'm going to throw this on the screen here. We'll listen to what it sounded like outside of Chase's house. I want people to put themselves in the mindset. You're sleeping, and at 2:30 in the morning, you have this. And then to law enforcement, we're going to respond to it. I want to hear from the local cop position, if you would.
Chase, are you inside? Can you acknowledge? Or Chase, can you step out with your hands up?
This is Travis County Sheriff's Department.
Travis County Sheriff's Office. Step
Yeah,
out of
as
your
they announce.
house now with your hands up.
Is that a lawful order?
With your hands
Yes.
up. Do it now. Do it slow. Okay, come outside. Step out. Step out.
So he's stepping out. If you're looking on the screen here, it's really, really bad, grainy photographs from across the way. But he's stepping out of his house from across the... And then you got the flashlights on. Weapon lights or flashlights, you think?
Those are flashlights.
Mm-hmm.
Walking.
So he comes out from the right-hand side of the video and steps in. It's not too much relevance. I'm going to actually drop the video sound, and we're going to talk about this for a second. Lawful order to step out of your house, even though you've broken no law, you've done nothing wrong, you've been asleep, and somebody else called and claimed that there was a murder-homicide situation and a homicide-suicide that was going to happen in your home. And now you've got to take lawful orders, allegedly, to go out and do this. What's your best protocol for someone is calling you out for a law enforcement action outside of your home and you've done absolutely nothing wrong? What is your advice for them?
You have to take it in good faith that they're there doing a lawful order, giving you lawful orders, and there's some sort of exigent circumstances, or maybe there's probable cause for it, and you're going to have to comply with those requests and do so peacefully. You're not going to barricade yourself. You're going to be safe. You're going to make sure that your hands are on full display, that you are in open dialogue with people, and that you're moving very slowly. There's no sorts of movements to, put your hands in your waistband, anything that's going to get guys that are hyped up to get a little bit trigger happy with you. You be overly complying with every single request. What's the danger in that situation for someone who's trying to do that and is not used to that kind of stress? Well, I mean, just the stress itself. I mean, you're going to have natural body reactions to that, right? I mean, you can have somebody wet themselves because they're never in that sort of an emergency situation. They're gonna, and at that time of day, I mean, you're gonna be out of a dead sleep. You might have somebody who's intoxicated. You might have somebody who just misunderstands what the requests are because they're unfamiliar with the way that it's being articulated to them. Maybe they hear something that's a little bit conflicting, where you have one officer who says, turn around, and the other one says, you go down to a knee, and then all of a sudden you are failing to comply with one where you're complying with another, and they might interpret that as, all right, well, this guy's going to not be willfully participating with us, and you could find yourself on the wrong end of some force.
So Joe Pags had the same situation happen, also in Texas, just a little bit down the road, down in a place called Bernie, or is that right? I don't know if he's in Bernie yet. Sorry, I saw another place. He's over north of San Antonio. At some point, I'll sit down with him in person out there. Here is his radio show and kind of a quick coverage. I cropped the video just to make it in the square, but we'll talk about that in just a second too. I think his tactic is actually very, very good. And one of the most important things they teach you when you're moving with a gun is what do they say? The three pieces are shoot, move, and communicate.
Don't know.
Yeah, it's a military thing. Shoot, move, and communicate. And if you can, communication is one of those like really critical things, especially when you're linking up, the blue on blue being the threat. The way you avoid that is good comms. The FBI is actually really bad at comms, so that's not surprising, actually, Steve.
Well, they don't communicate with like local law enforcement because
they don't
that would
communicate with their
require
own teams.
using another radio.
Yeah, well, they don't even. I've never even seen FBI agents use radios properly. So there's that. Okay, so here's Joe Pags talking about this. His idea of calling 911 and getting a positive phone link up with the people that are on scene, I think, is actually very good. It's the same thing I would recommend for people. And if you're a conservative and you're in the world and someone decides to try this stuff on you, this is my ongoing advice: get a positive link up via phone through the dispatch. Again, we talked about computer-aided dispatch and radio dispatch. They can chirp this into an ear. They can splice in a phone call into the radio so you can actually talk to the officers.
What Alpha did when the sheriff's office came for him. He was in communication saying, like, I have young children coming out, and to make sure that they are completely in the know. No, there's no surprises.
Exactly that. All right, so here's Joe talking about it, and this is what he did. And you'll see the video of them, which they're stalking his backyard, which is actually a lot creepier looking.
So I waited a couple of days because I didn't want to put this out there yesterday and put fuel in the fire, maybe give somebody some oxygen who was trying to get some publicity out of this. But we were swatted 2 nights ago at my house. Now, the good thing is I'm up until about 5 o'clock in the morning. This happened at 2:35 a.m. And we have cameras around the house. Some you can see, some you can't. So if you're a bad guy out there, you're not going to see where they all are. But we have cameras outside the house, and at 2:35 in the morning, I got an indication on my phone that there was some camera, or there was some movement, it's a motion sensor, at the front door. And I went, okay, that's weird. Maybe a bug. Who knows? Maybe the dogs had to go out. My wife took the dogs out. Nope. It was a guy holding an AR-15 with a cap on, looking in my window. Now, at that point, you say to yourself, well, I've got a rifle too. Can go grab that and go see what's what. I've got 5 other guns nearby. Grab some of them, go see what's what. And then, end up in a shootout at 2:35 in the morning in the middle of rural Texas.
This is the danger. This is what
That's
they want.
something that I don't think that I wanted to do immediately. So what happened was I had this level of calculation in my brain going about a million miles a second. And I said, okay, first thing I need to do, because when it's at night, the cameras are very good. They're color cameras, they're audio cameras. But at night, it goes to sort of a night vision view. So I can't tell if it's a police officer or not. I don't know who it is, but he looks a little bit nervous. But
that
believe me, I've got a
right
video
there.
of this guy with a rifle at my front door.
Like chicken wing arm,
holding it, ready to use it. And I called 911. That was the right answer. And I said, this is my address. This is who I am. Radio, television, talk show host. So some would say public figure. I think I'm being swatted. Are you guys at my house? About 2 seconds later, she said, yes, we are. We got a report of this, and this. Dogs were shot. People were bleeding. People were hiding. And none of that was true.
And the key to that I wanted to share was him kind of explaining what the 911 dispatcher was hearing. That's why we started with the idea of the CAD. The information that's being updated for these officers on scene is more and more intense. Someone has been killed. Animals are being killed. I'm going to kill anybody that comes nearby. All of the wild statements that get people ratcheted up so that those cops have the same sympathetic nervous reaction. They're going in looking for, like, expecting conflict and wanting to survive. And meanwhile, you're asleep.
And it creates a mechanism through exigency to bypass normal protections against the police, is an ability to just enter your home at will. Right. I had a report that there was a threat to life going on, that people were bleeding, that animals were bleeding, and they're saying that I can't be taken alive. And then all of a sudden I hear a loud bang. I'm going to the door. And the law is going to protect that officer in that situation. And you're going to find yourself in a good shoot. It will be cleared. And in a negative consequence that it was a tragic consequence.
That's right. When you choose the way that you respond to a threat, that's also oftentimes choosing the outcome that is going to come out. And so we see this in the time when this is the reason why you don't want the FBI sending a SWAT team for J6ers. You want to stop this kind of stuff. This is a federal crime, by the way, folks. There's ways that you can charge this federally because it's using interstate communication. So anytime over the internet, anytime over the phone, there's an interstate nexus, which means the FBI can get involved. The question is it one person who's doing all of these? Apparently, all of these people, from our friend Brianna Morello was talking about, were sent pizza. At least a lot of them were. They were sent a pizza order that was like cash on delivery so that they were able to notify that somebody was actually physically at the house. And they were trying to first affirm that they were people resident and then send police there in an evil way. It's really, really ugly stuff. Again, it is the exact weaponization of government. It takes the thing that is supposed to be protective and it turns it into an oppressive and adversarial force and against necessarily the will of the people that are involved in it. The agency is being targeted and pointed at people, even though that's not what they intended to do most of the time. I imagine those cops in rural Texas are not a problem, like, by themselves.
And who's to say that you can't have downstream consequences when there actually is a legitimate reason to SWAT a house, right? And now they're going to be having the boy who cried wolf situation when they're like, you know, I'm maybe going to be a little bit hesitant when I don't need to be hesitant, when I need to go into that house to protect life.
Yeah, my recommendation is that positive link up that Joe talked about, calling 911, getting it through, making sure that you let them know who you are so you can try to de-escalate, at least in the comms. They may have heard one thing. It's hard to shake that, especially when you're in the moment and you're all amped up, ready to handle business. You're standing out in somebody's backyard in the darkness with a rifle. And at the same time, if they're like, hey, this is potentially a swatting situation, that is not, the more we talk about it, the more people are going to understand what that is and why it is a real threat. And it's actually a threat to law enforcement and their sanity. Nobody wants to be the guy that goes in thinking that they're doing the right thing and putting down some innocent person who was in fact targeted by some political bullshit, which is what we're talking about here. I got a couple other things. I got a video of I told you we would get to the worst people, the kind of people that I imagine do this. These are aggressive people, but don't have natural masculine outputs for it. So they are men who act like what they think women look like. And it turns out, like, most women don't actually engage in physical violence. I think it's actually the weapon of a coward to do the swatting type thing. And the most cowardly people I can think of are men that dress like women and then try to tell people, try to lecture them. So I've been following this story about this guy named Sarah McBride, who's used to be called Tim. And I got a couple things about Tim. Let's start with who Tim is. Can we do that?
Let's get the background. So we have.
Let's get the background. This is Tim. He was at American University, which was a hotbed for anti-Trump activity in 2016 and 2017, was part of the Disrupt J20 protest that happened at the inauguration of Donald Trump, were basically all briefed at American University. Things I know because I worked in the FBI there. So a lot of Antifa, he was the student body president. I don't have a year on this, but I imagine it's about that same time. Here's Tim McBride prior to him deciding to put on woman face.
My name is Tim McBride. I'm the student body president at American University. I'm proud to join over 100 other student body presidents to sign this letter and send the message to the president and congressional leaders that bold action is required and required now. Our economic recovery and our long-term fiscal stability are far too important to be subject to partisan political point scoring. I'm signing this letter because it's time for this generation of leaders to show the next that Washington can still work together for the common good and that elected officials still have our best interests at heart.
Okay, so he doesn't totally plan on being a congressperson at that age, but obviously, like,
student body president, your leadership has nothing to do with the goings-on in Congress.
Okay, but what he's been doing is going out and lecturing people of late, saying that Republicans are obsessed with the culture war and they're only interested in doing culture war stuff. Let's do some culture war stuff. Here's Tim McBride, who is singing. Did I ever tell you about Shania versus Shania Twain?
Yes, you did, but it's worth going back into.
Okay, so just real quickly, folks, if you're new to the audience, I had a friend who was Polish when I lived in London for a little bit, and we had this really funny interaction because in Poland and the way that people pronounce things in Polish, they pronounce the language a little bit differently, and when they see English letters, they do it a little bit differently, the Roman alphabet. So I had a friend whose name was Mihao, and at one point in time, I played a song from him, which was Shania Twain, and I said, do you know this song? And he said, yes, that's Shania Twain. Everybody knows Shania Twain in Poland, which made me very much laugh, so I always think of her as Shania Twain. Here's Shania Twain, performed by Tim, Don't Call Me Sarah Yet, McBride.
Cover my head, do it again. I wanna be free, yeah. I feel the way I feel. Man, I feel like a woman.
I kind of want to do the, what's the Asian guy that goes like, gay?
That's a professionally produced video, right? They set up a camera to see the vehicle driving away. Somebody sitting shotgun, filming this entire thing.
Yep.
This is all for show.
Okay, you do something on your program called the O'Boyle Over Meter. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you describe the O'Boyle Meter for people that have not heard the American Radicals podcast?
Well, the American Radicals podcast available Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday on rumble.com.
Drop the quarter in there.
Pod. My co-host Garrett O'Boyle. I like to set him to 0 and then geek him up to see if I can get his head to explode, which normally ends with lots of Bible verses so he can get himself back to standard.
Okay, so I'm going to O'Boyle over you. We're slowly building up the pressure on this pot. So we've now seen him do his political aspirations, his Feel Like a Woman, Shania Twain, professionally shot, weird, cringy video. And he's lecturing Republicans about how they're obsessing about the culture war. Tell me what you call this thing.
I have a girl brain, but a boy body. This is called transgender. I was born this way. When I was very little, and my mom would say, "You're such a good boy," I would say, "No, Mama, good girl." At first, my family was confused. They'd always thought of me as a boy. You can see Jazz there with her family.
That is a welcoming schools presentation being done in a library for children who look like they are under the age of 7. I have a 7-year-old daughter and she looks slightly older than them. So this is like 4, 5, 6-year-olds tops, and being presented by the National Education or Educators Association. Another thing that has completely been, this is the reason why public schools are the cornerstone of our democracy. Their purpose is not to educate anymore. They are to indoctrinate, which is why we don't like sending our kids to public schools per se.
You have to, again, define your term. What is educate?
Mm-hmm.
I would think that they view education as essentially child exploitation and grooming, because that's what that clearly is. And at any other time in our country's history, no one would object when the posse rounded that evil, satanic being up and skinned him alive and left him in the desert.
One of my favorite people in the conservative, quote unquote, influencer space, somebody who probably doesn't have to worry about being swatted because he's so well prepared, is a guy named John Lowell. Sorry. Do you know John Lowell?
Sounds familiar.
So he owns and operates a thing called the Warrior Poet Society. If I can get him on as a guest at the podcast, I would like to do that at some point in the future because he's just one of my favorites. I love the way that he talks. I love the way that he has a positivity despite some of the negative things he's seen. He's a former Ranger Battalion guy, total stud, does great pistol training, does some of the best instructional videos for people that are new to firearms. So if you haven't checked out Warrior Poet Society, do so. Here he is talking very simply in a thing that we've probably heard before to Sean Ryan, another guy I like a lot, who's been very, very amusing. Sean Ryan, by the way, is exactly the way that he sounds like on the podcast. He's exactly that way whenever I've had phone calls with him. He's like, no shit. He's just incredulous about the like really simple stuff.
Nice humble brag, by the way.
super normal guy though. Yeah, humble brag that he called me up and asked me things, which was very funny. We had a moment at the beginning of this year that was very unusual. Here's John discussing the exact thing we're talking about when indoctrination is the policy. That's why they're fighting for public schools right now. And again, I think this is weaponization.
Why would you trust your kids to be educated by the government?
Vody Bachman said, don't be surprised when you send your kids off to Caesar and they come back as Romans. Like, that's it, man. You're wondering why everyone's gone woke and has no idea what bathroom to use anymore. If like, what happened to our kids? I'm like, well, you gave them to the government for their entire childhood. You saw them at dinner and you attended their sporting events, but the government raised your kids. And social media helped. And video games or whatever, but you saw them every day, but you didn't raise them. You didn't log enough hours each day to counteract all the poison and time wasting and ideological propagandistic crap that they were getting fed.
Really straightforward. Again, John Lovell, awesome stuff. Warrior Poet Society. And you want to see where that all leads?
Send it, sir.
Okay. If you're missing the visual on this, you are in fact missing something. And I encourage you to check it out. I did put it out on Twitter. It's something I made for you. I am the world's okayest sort of snarky video maker. So you're missing the visuals here, but I'll just give you a tip. This man dressed up like a woman now, called Tim/Sarah McBride, is now going to lecture us on culture war after participating in it quite obviously. but also does it in a mansplaining way, which is my favorite thing. Again, this is my argument for why they're the worst. Here we go.
We will not take a lecture on decorum from a party that incited an insurrection. I appear to live rent-free in the minds of some of my Republican colleagues. I wish that they would spend even a fraction of the time that they spend thinking about me, thinking about how to lower the costs for American families. I wish they would spend a fraction of the time that they spend thinking about me, figuring out how to make government actually work better, rather than making it work worse in order to prove that government can't work. They are obsessed with culture war issues. The Republican Party is obsessed with culture war issues. It is weird and it is bizarre. And the American people deserve serious legislators, serious elected officials who are focused on bringing people together to deliver real results for the American people, not to play games and not to engage in schoolyard taunts.
I just see Adam's apple, Adam's apple, Adam's apple bouncing up and down, being lectured by a man.
Couple things on Timmy. It's weird and bizarre. Bro, you want to pee next to women. So slow your roll on that one. And I always weird. Love to, if you want to see the inner man come out of any of these trannies, you just tell them no. and then the fact that all men are dicks does come to the surface because, boy, is Timmy really upset. And then again, the counterpoint, got those girls in the background. They're just nodding along. I mean, I think it is 1 and 1A for who is the worst.
It's interesting, too, when I see people... you can't call people liberal if they're voting against actual liberty. And I see that in the gun right community, too. I have a thing that kind of like jumped up. I don't know. I actually have softened my stance on what it used to be when I was in the military law enforcement. I used to kind of believe like, yeah, if you're a dangerous person, if you make bad decisions with a firearm, probably you shouldn't have a firearm. And then I got to the point where I started having more empathy, which is a weird place to be. And when you start going, who needs a gun more than someone who actually is a convicted felon and has actually, come out of a dangerous position? I'm seriously.
Biden is playing with some rough people. He probably needs a firearm.
Yeah. So if you have come out of prison and you've served your time and you are now acceptable for society to have you in it, then you are acceptable to have a firearm, and I think you should be able to vote. That is my strong stance.
That is where I'm there, and the
otherwise we shouldn't let you out.
If that makes you uncomfortable to let a convicted felon who has now done their time come out, if you say, hey, he's dangerous, I don't want him having a gun, why did you let him out of jail to begin with?
Exactly the case. It should not be that it's for prison labor, and it should not be that you're trying to get a quota or anything else. Like, you don't let somebody out on conditional release and then say, that's forever. You're conditionally not a person anymore. They actually did that before. It used to be called slavery, where you didn't have all the rights of the other people. And I don't like the idea of a second-class citizen, not in America. That's my take on it. It's a very illiberal position. So I'm fine with the idea of reforming prisons. But at the same time, if they're too dangerous to be out there in the public, then they shouldn't be out in the public. The end. Full stop. Either you're out and you're part of us. There's maybe some very, very narrow exceptions to that. I actually can't think of how that would work. If you actually applied that universally, if you were too dangerous to be around people, then you are. The end. You don't get to hold a gun. There's this controversy about Mel Gibson and his gun rights. And this went on, this is on CNN. They brought this lady on who says she got fired for it. By the way, the Justice Department said, no, we actually fired her for some other reasons. How about insubordination? Like, you were given a pretty straight order. Do you think anybody could have pushed back against Joe Biden and say, hey, we're not going to write up the documentation for the pardon of Hunter or your family members who have not even been accused of a crime? Would those people have been removed? Did anyone cry? You didn't see crying about it then, but you're crying about Mel Gibson getting a handgun. Like, one of the richest people in the world. Let's just be real honest. Mel Gibson is one of the richest people ever. That's just how it works. Anyway, this is the and notice this woman looks an awful lot like what I expect Tim/Sarah will grow into.
I was asked to write a memo to the Attorney General recommending that these 9 individuals get this relief that she was interested in granting to some deserving Americans. And when the memo came back to me, the comment was, please add Mel Gibson to this recommendation.
Who asked you to add Mel Gibson?
An official in the office of the Deputy Attorney General who is running this project on the day-to-day instructed me that Mel Gibson should be added to the memo.
Do you know the name of that person? Could you share it with us?
It's one of the associate deputy attorney generals. There are several in the office, and I don't want to call anyone out by name, but there is email traffic between me and a number of individuals in the Deputy Attorney General's office about this issue. And the request was made. And I responded that I was unable to fulfill the request because I did not have enough information about Mr. Gibson to.
And then rather than getting more of the information, what I decided to do was continue to talk just like this. And then NBC News reached out for comment and says, quote, a Justice Department official familiar with the matter, aka anonymous source, told NBC News that the firing was not related to the Gibson case. The Mel Gibson decision did not play a role in the termination decision. The paperwork was actually done before the Mel Gibson email went out, said the person on a condition of anonymity. So an anonymous source was not even making a legal comment and allowed to talk about it. How long could we do that? I could do that indefinitely, by the way. I would eventually end up swatting myself, but
well, as a callback to some of our previous stories, I mean, I went into that, watching that video firmly in the camp of, if you do your time, you should get your firearm. And then we should probably allow all people to have firearms. And then very much like Thomas Massey, they talked me into the fact that if you uptalk like she does, then you probably shouldn't be able to defend yourself.
Because at some point, you probably might end up being like this person, your favorite. This is my argument again, the worst people in America, people who do wild things. I want you to close your eyes, audience, all of you that are listening. Picture the person that you're about to see. This is a person that would be engaged in reckless and dangerous behavior, bombing a Tesla dealership and shooting it up and throwing firebombs in. What does that person look like? They're from Portland. Does that help you? Picture them. Now we're going to show them on the screen. Enjoy. I love it when people say stuff, set me up for success, and then they don't disappoint me.
So to protest Elon Musk, someone shot up and firebombed a Tesla dealership in Salem, Oregon last month, and that suspect has finally been caught by authorities and is facing federal charges, including domestic terrorism. Now, when you think of someone that would do something like this, you would think they would be from Portland, and you can kind of imagine what they would look like. Well, it's exactly that. His name is Adam Matthew Lansky, a far-left trans activist who used to train LGBTQIA+ activists on using weapons. He loves guns. He also has a porn channel, and he goes under the name Allison Tesla. Thank you to my friend Andy No for the reporting on this. If convicted, Lansky is facing up to 40 years in prison. I say good. Just want to shout out real quick the FBI Portland for doing their job, the same one that...
Yeah, that's the first time they've ever done that, so that's weird.
I heard that
actually might be the argument that
they're protesters.
I was specifically told that they love their political activists. That might be the first time FBI Portland has actually been allowed to do their job. And I don't know if that's FBI Portland's fault or if it's the AUSAs there and the SACs they put in charge. But maybe cash is actually having an effect, because that actually is kind of unexpected in Portland.
I mean, any sort of progress on arresting anyone in Portland is probably progress. And you saw the picture there at the end of the agent walking away with the blue raid jacket, which no one ever wears unless
that's from a photo shoot. Nobody wears this. Nicole Parker does.
Someone tell me yesterday that you'll see all the postings online now, especially for the ICE raids. They are being specifically told that they must pose in photos with their backs to the camera, and this is the way that they're actually accounting for all of the illegals within the FBI.
I don't understand.
I don't know why.
Why are they turning their back? That's just the new messaging?
That's sort of the new pose, I guess, so that their identities aren't revealed because they're really secret agents, but they're having agents who are saying, I don't want to be photographed because I just did my job. Say, no, you have to pose for a picture with your back to the camera so we can get a picture of you arresting an illegal alien.
We're doing messaging.
We're doing serious.
I'm going to take a deep breath on that. Of all the things that I could be outraged on, that is not very far into the Kyle spectrum of weaponization. That is like somewhere to the right of the middle. And I'm going to contain my own irritation on that.
The old boil meter, I send it right back at you.
Yeah, that doesn't really bother me as much as it could, I guess. All right, that's what we're going to do for today. Let me go ahead and say again, folks, if you want to support the channel, you can go to rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. You can go to youtube.com/@Kyle Seraphin. It's @Kyle Seraphin over on X. All the places you can follow us, and the locals channel. This is KyleSeraphin.com if you want to get our Sunday sit down a day early. Spotify is the place you can follow us if you want to get it ad-free. I've got a little taste of what's coming up on Sunday, Steve. I'll play that. Then we'll give you a little pitch on the run out for what you're doing for AMRAD, and then I'll give the palate cleanse. We went long because I don't care. I'm the boss of me. Here we go.
As a soldier, one of the things you don't worry about being downrange is Americans are Americans. We're all fighting the same cause. We're fighting on the same team. So I have 2 CIA assets in the room with me. I didn't know that at the time. One was with the Colombian Intelligence Service. This one right up to the top. And this was essentially a great way to really hurt Donald Trump. Back then, I don't want to say the Trump administration because you can't. The Trump administration back then was so fragmented between the people who are working against Donald Trump, like the Gina Haskells and the Bill Barrs and the Mike Pompeos and Elliot Abrams and all of these individuals. And Elliot Abrams, if you read my discovery, it is a who's who of the State Department at the highest levels. It is mind-blowing. We'll fast forward, a year and a half. When everything happens and the operation's sabotaged, Elliot Abrams goes in front of the Senate subcommittee hearing and basically says, "No, we just learned about this. We had no idea."
All right, that is the Sunday sit-down that I'm doing. That'll come out on Sunday at 1 p.m. You'll see it streaming live on all the places. It's a live premiere. That's Jordan Goudreau. He is the Green Beret that staged a coup to take over Venezuela, and the story is freaking wild, dude. And I don't know how much of it. I don't know. No caveat. It's a wild story, one way or another. Steve, what do you got coming up on Saturday for folks?
All right, so we're returning back to this new tradition that we have on the American Radicals podcast for Saturday. It's a Saturday grab bag because there's just way too much news to get to. We got like 15, 16 stories. We're going to churn and burn through them. Includes like AOC under some sort of ethics complaint. Lots more stuff coming out about coronavirus. All of it. All across the board. We're just going to pull it out. I'm going to try to get Garrett to freak out, get his head to explode. It'll be a good time. Join us 10:30 Eastern time on rumble.com/amradpod.
Buddy, thanks for joining me. Folks in the chat who are over there, if you are over on YouTube, we see you there. Now we crossed 100, so we're making ground up on the YouTube channel, which is kind of fun to see. The Rumble folks, all of you out there, hundreds and hundreds. I think sometimes maybe I'll look over here. Hold on, let me just look. I want to know now. We're at over 2,000, so we stream a pretty good game over on Rumble. So for all of you that watch it live, really appreciate that. I do have a palate cleanser for you, just something about office things. For those of you that are listening, this is the perfect palate cleanser for my listeners only. If you're an audio only, this is meant for you. If you're watching, you're going to be able to see it. The word dongle and being on a conference call is something that we all are familiar with now after the COVID stuff, so enjoy this little weird send-off on a Friday. Try to get not sexual in your workplaces, people. It's just too much. And don't leave poor Steve on the conference call without a little visual here, because he doesn't know what you guys are doing.
Oh, you got a huge dongle. Thanks. Gets the job done, I guess.
I've seen bigger.
I have a really small one.
Well, mine's normal size, but it doesn't work like it used to.
Hey guys, what is going on in there?
Presentation.
Paul's trying to get his up.
Trip, I think yours is too wide.
I've got two. Can you use them at the same time? Never tried it. Has anyone seen mine? It's resting on top of a sack.
Trip, is yours wider than it is long? Never seen that before.
Wait, Tara, do you have one?
Yeah, but it's at home in my drawer.
You know, mine was like this once.
Mine bends to the left. Oh, I think you're stepping on mine. Is yours purple? Just the top part.
Actually, Clint, let me hold yours for a second. Sure. Why is this so hard?
Did you try taking it out and putting it back in? I think it's stuck.
Sometimes if you jiggle it around a little bit, that helps. Push it harder.
That's all we got for today, folks. God bless all of you. Thanks to Steve for joining me. Guys, go check out the AMRAD podcast. It's at AMRADPod over on Rumble. You can find him over on X as well. And I hope you have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you either on Saturday for the sit-down, Sunday for the sit-down, or Monday at 09:30 Eastern Time here on the Kyle Seraphin Show. Let's shut this one down.
Thanks for listening to the Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.